small, tiny, all these words that people are using to describe her. And I got worried that how is she attaching those things to herself?
Hi, you're listening to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney. Today I have a special topic episode with mom Emily Young. Emily shared her story about her daughter Nora with achondroplasia, a form of dwarfism, in last week's episode. In this episode, we talk all about educating others about our children's differences. Emily has had quite a bit of experience with other people underestimating Nora because of her size and underestimating her age and babying her. And so we talk a lot about what that's been like for her and her family and how she has chosen to approach it, especially in public with people that she doesn't know. So I feel like this was a really good conversation to have, both for people like us with children with special needs and for other people to listen to if you wonder how to react to people who have differences. And I'll give you a hint. Just treat them like a regular person because they are. I love that Emily is sharing about educating others because she is a special education teacher. So I just feel like she was the perfect person to talk about educating others. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation. Emily, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Of course. Okay, we're going to talk today about educating others as your special topic, which I love since you are a special education teacher. So educating someone just makes so much sense for your topic. What is your purpose in educating others about Nora?
I think my biggest goal when I'm educating about Nora is for people to understand that just because she's small, it doesn't mean that she isn't capable. Even now at 2, I find that people think of her as a baby, not a toddler, even though she's walking around and talking and communicating. And the initially when people see her, they just, oh, what a cute little baby, which is nice. I know they don't mean any harm by it, but it just kind of gives me a glimpse into the future of what people are going to think given her size, since she'll never really be average height. So I worry that people will think because she's small, she's not capable, or that she's much younger than she is, not smart. She doesn't understand what people are saying, but she does.
Right. They'll just assume these things just because she's small.
Yeah. So I think I'd like people to understand her better and kind of accept that just because she's small doesn't mean she can't do everything you or I can do.
Right.
Or the same things that every average 2-year-old can do. She might just have to do it a little differently.
Yeah. What does that look like when you are in public and someone makes a comment and you decide that you do want to educate them? What's like a common scenario with that?
So I can give you an example of a time we were at the public library in town, and we had several encounters, actually, to the point where it almost became uncomfortable. And nobody was meaning any harm by it at all. But we walked in, and one of the people working there had said, I think that's the tiniest human I've ever seen walk through these doors. And I know what she meant by it, but in my mama heart, I was like, oh man, that it just kind of hit me wrong. And so I kind of walked away from that one. I let that one go, which I do sometimes I don't. And then as we were leaving the same place, we were in the parking lot, and another very nice older woman just came up to us and started talking and said, "Wow, she's so small. She's so tiny. How is she walking?" And so I explained, and I said, "Well, she has dwarfism." I said, "She's a little person." I said, "She's always going to be smaller than the average size person." And she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, okay." And that was it. And then I could have said more, and sometimes I do. But in that case, I kind of left it at that. Nora had just turned 2 at the time, and I kind of could see the wheels turning in her head. Like she knew we were talking about her. Did she understand all the things that we were saying? Probably not. But it kind of hit me that
Mm.
small, tiny, all these words that people are using to describe her, and I got worried that how is she attaching those things to herself in
Yeah.
those words? Um, so now that she's getting older, I feel like I have to pick and choose a little more how I communicate with others about
Yeah.
Nora so that she can pick up on what I say and hopefully use my words to start advocating for herself. So when
Yeah.
someone says, "Oh, what a cute baby," for her to say, "Well, I'm not a baby, I'm 2." Um,
Yeah.
or kids at school because she goes to daycare 3 times a week. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if kids are calling her a baby, what she can say, things like that. So it gets tricky. I mean, there's certain
Mm-hmm.
times I have the energy and I feel like explaining her whole story if people seem willing to listen or
Mm-hmm.
accepting of listening. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
other times that I just short and sweet and we go on with our day just to keep it as normal as possible. Um,
Yeah.
it can change too depending on if my son is with us or not, how I react to others.
How does that look? So if your son's with you, how do you alter or modify it for him?
Um, I think I usually will read him. I can tell by his
Okay.
face his level of comfort. So if he's feeling like he'll give me this look like, "Aren't you going to say something?" Like someone just commented on her, "You're not going to say anything." And then I kind of feel like I have to just to
Yeah.
model it for him.
Okay.
Um, and then there's other times that he'll just come out and say it himself. Well, she's small. She has
Interesting.
dwarfism. She's fine. She
That's
can talk.
awesome.
She can walk. She's great. Um,
Yeah.
so that also depends on the situation. There's been a couple times where people were a little more aggressive with their words, I guess is the way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we both looked at each other and kind of chose to just walk away at that point. He's also very sensitive, so
Mm.
to what people say to her. Um, so we also have to be careful about how we react when he's
Yeah.
around. But
How have you guys had open discussions about educating others, and what have you told him about that?
yes, we talk about it all the time actually. And
Mm.
he talks to her about it a lot. The
Oh,
other day
okay.
actually in the yard, he just turned to
So
her and he said, "Nora, you have dwarfism. You're going to be small." And that was it. That was all. He's like,
interesting.
you're going to be okay." Like he has his own conversations with her about
Oh
it.
my
And we've
gosh.
always been very open with him about what it all means. And he has when she was first born, so 2 years ago, he was a little bit younger. He had lots
Mm-hmm.
of questions like, can she go to school? Will she have babies? Can she get married someday? Um, can Nora play soccer? Could she be a doctor? So we talk a lot about how just
Mm.
because she's small doesn't mean she can't do any of the things that you can do. She might just need
Right.
to do it differently or
Mm.
might need some help with it. Um, so he kind of uses those phrases too with other people. And if people call her a baby, he'll say she's not a baby, she's a toddler.
I
That's
love
kind
that.
of his thing. Um, or he'll just come right out and say she's a little person. She has dwarfism. She's small. So
Mm.
yeah,
Okay. So Emily, your blog, mylittlelove.net,
yes,
you uh, previously told me that that was inspired by the lack of positive information on the internet when you first found out that she probably had that while you were pregnant with her. Can you
yes,
tell me more about that?
yeah. Like I had said before, when we first found out about Nora's diagnosis or possibility of diagnosis, we did a lot of research on our own, which we definitely shouldn't. I do not recommend that.
Yeah. It's
I
so
do
hard
not
not
recommend
to.
Googling things.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to.
Yeah.
But both my husband and I spent a lot of time doing that, and not much positive information or encouraging information came out of it.
Hmm.
Um, it made us more scared and more worried. There wasn't a lot of information easily found from parents that had experienced what we were going through. Um, so the blog was kind of a way for me to process everything that was going on while
Mm-hmm.
writing it out. But it was also, even more importantly, for other people to hopefully find honesty,
Mm-hmm.
our honest story, but also encouraging and positive things. So not every blog
Mm-hmm.
post is positive because there are some challenges that we've had with Nora as well, but um, I try to be honest and encouraging at the same time to show parents that everything will be okay and that
Mm-hmm.
there's more out there than the negative statistics and um, a lot of the things that the doctors told us that she can't do or won't do,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that parents can have something a little bit more hopeful. So
Okay.
that was the main purpose. That's also how the blog was also how we kind of spread the word about Nora.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't told anyone but immediate, or I should say, extended family, close family, about
Mm-hmm.
Nora when she was born, and a couple close friends. It wasn't
Oh,
something
okay.
we shared with everybody at first.
Yeah.
Um, so the blog was kind of my way of doing that too, I guess.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
did you direct people to it? Like, oh, it's in my blog. You can read about it there.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, my first post, I posted it on social media. So
Okay.
people outside of our immediate circle would know about Nora. So I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have to have that awkward conversation about it, I guess, and
Yeah.
field a lot of questions. And I'm kind of a shy person. So this was a way to put it out there, but not have immediate feedback
Yeah.
right away because I was still processing it. It was only 2.5 months after she was born. So I was still trying
Yeah.
to figure it all out myself. And in our family, we were still trying to process everything and help Nate through it and all that. So
Yeah. Um, did you receive positive feedback from that, or were some comments hurtful? Did How did that go?
it actually went really well. We got I got lots of positive feedback, both about my blog writing and about Nora,
Okay.
and about appreciating that I was sharing and educating about her. So
Mm-hmm.
many people have never met someone like Nora. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only mom and of all my friends that have a child with achondroplasia, and before Nora, we had only bumped into one little person before we had
Mm-hmm.
Nora. So it's so rare that I was hoping that the blog would kind of spread awareness and acceptance so people would understand her better, um,
Yeah.
and make things easier for her down the road too.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to your educating even just strangers at the store, right? Where
Yeah.
if they are one of those people who are willing to listen or you feel like talking about everything, what is your hope for those people and how that might affect the world as a whole?
um, I guess my hope is that they'll just see Nora like everybody else. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've encountered a few things where people point and stare, and not at Nora specifically, but at other little people that we've become friends with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just that people treat people with differences not always in the nicest way,
Yeah.
and I don't want my daughter to. I know it's inevitable and it's going to happen, but I feel like the
Mm-hmm.
more people that understand and accept her and realize that her differences don't really make her that much different than us,
Mm-hmm.
um, that she'll come across less bullying or
Mm-hmm.
um, less pointing and staring, and people will just ask questions and say hi and treat her just like every other person should be treated.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I like picturing that, like, I don't know, as we do educate other people or just help them see, like, yeah, like they're still like this awesome person. Just because they're different than you or your child doesn't mean that they're not amazing and have a lot to offer. I love that idea of people then maybe someone who's interacted with you and your family, and then down the road meeting another little person, or I mean any kind of, disability
Yeah.
or difference, and be like, oh, they're like Nora. Like
Right.
Nora's total, like, I love Nora. They're like, there's she's wonderful and amazing, and so I don't know, almost like also just the shock factor is like less there, because I think honestly that's probably the biggest struggle, is just being like, whoa, they look different. And so I don't know. I like the idea that the more
Yeah.
interaction she has with other people, and the other, I don't know, all of us, that as our children
Yeah.
interact with the world, that they're just less like surprised to see, wow, there's someone who looks different than me. Because,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of differences in the world and variety, but I don't know.
And kids, I think kids especially just say what they see. They don't
Yeah.
have a filter, so it just comes out sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if parents can just kind of help them through that and have, you know, help them figure out that it's not such a big deal, and the parents' reaction also matters, because the
Mm-hmm.
kids will feed off of that. So if you're being respectful and kind and just treating kids like Nora just like everybody else, that your
Mm-hmm.
kids will see that too,
Right.
and they'll just treat people kindly. It's just
Yeah, I love that. That example is so powerful. I think that's even, I don't know, sometimes even as adults, I think sometimes we don't totally know how to act around someone who looks different or acts different. It's
yeah.
like, I don't know, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I shouldn't stare. And I'm like, oh, but now I'm ignoring them. I don't know. But I think
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know, what
hard.
would you say the bottom line is for, as a guideline for showing a good example for your children?
I think just if you if you model how you would want to be treated. I mean, if you were the
Mm-hmm.
one with the difference, how would you want people to react to you? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely can be awkward. You're not sure what to say, and you don't want to stare, you don't want to point, but if your kids have questions, I think you should talk to them about it, not just shush
Yeah.
them and say, we're not going to talk about that,
Yeah.
and just kind of ignore it. I think it's really important to let them ask you questions about someone with a difference, and then just kind of process it through with them.
Yeah.
Just say hi, give a wave. It doesn't have to be awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, I think the more we can model that for our kids, it's going to spread.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like thinking, like even with Kimball's hearing aids, for example, that's something that really stands out, because honestly, so he's little too, but he's also doing all the things that a 9-month-old would do anyway. So his tiny size is like, I don't know, I don't think his size really gets people, but like things like his hearing aids, and
yeah.
a lot of little kids will just come up to us and be like, what are those? And I'm like, I'm so happy to tell you about hearing aids. Like, I think it, just
Right.
asking a question instead of, like you said, shushing, like I think that is
Right.
more respectful, because it's like, it's not, when you shush, it makes it seem like it's this dirty bad thing, like, oh, don't
Yeah.
say that, that's insulting. Like, no, it's okay, like we can talk about it. um
Right.
and I, like you said, I like how you mentioned, like with the librarian, where you're like, wasn't in the mood, not gonna, you don't have to always be educating, but you can
Yeah.
when you want to.
Yeah. I do tend to educate more, I'd say, with kids than
Okay.
adults, because I feel like kids are so impressionable. So
Mm-hmm.
Nora was at dance class a couple months ago, and one of the little girls just looked at her and looked at her and then looked at me and said, "Why is her head so big and her arms are so short?" And I was immediately wanted to protect Nora from that. She was
Mm-hmm.
oblivious. She was spinning around dancing. She didn't even really
Cute.
notice.
Yeah.
But my immediate reaction was, don't say that about her, like in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, this child is only about 5 or 6 years old. This is her way of wanting to know. She wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't it wasn't a teasing situation. It was more just pure curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just explained to her, I said, she has dwarfism, her bones grow differently than yours. And that was it. And she was fine with that. And she just said, oh, and they went about their business dancing in the hallway waiting for class. And it was fine.
Mm,
So I think kids, I'll definitely, if a kid asks the question, I feel like I always stop to address it because I feel like it's really important for them to
yeah.
understand. Um,
Yeah. I love that.
and then the next time they see someone with a difference, whether it's like Nora's or not, they can remember that conversation and just remember, well, her bones grow differently and keep it
Right.
really simple.
Right. Yeah. And I think that even could apply, she might even apply it to anyone that has any kind of difference, like physically or mentally, that she might just be like, oh, they're just formed differently, which is
Yeah.
like, I feel like that's a really good explanation for a lot of different disabilities. Um, Really quick as a side note, too, so we're both members of the same Facebook group for parents of little people, which is how we met. I think, yeah,
Yes.
basically, I think so. um, and I saw a post about a parent that was really upset because someone called her child a midget, and people were calling it the M word. And I was like, I didn't even know that was disrespectful or offensive. Can you explain a little bit about? I think I was like, I don't even know this, and I have a child who could be targeted with this. So, if I don't know, just for a public statement, can you explain how that's not the best thing to call some a little child, like a little person,
Yep.
or yeah? Can you? And honestly, for me, I'm really
Yeah.
curious.
So there's actually through that group, there's been lots of parents that before they had a child with dwarfism didn't realize that that word was hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
I've always disliked that word, even
Mm-hmm.
before Nora. But now that Nora's in our life, it means that much more to me,
Right.
that we don't use that word. And that's actually something that we've taught our son too. And he's actually let other kids know that that word is just not something that's nice to say to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that word was used a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was seen as okay to use. But the LPA fought, the Little People of America Association, they fought really hard to get that word kind of dismissed so that
Oh, okay.
it wasn't used in general language anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of like sports teams and things like that around the country that use it in their name, and a lot of
Oh,
schools are starting to change their names, so that they're not using the word midget. Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, so it's considered derogatory for little people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from what I've learned in the past 2 years, is the best way to address someone with dwarfism is just to call them by their name.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to
I love
speak
that.
about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're
But
a
if you
person.
must, yeah, but if you must use a label or another term, little person is the next best thing.
Okay.
And there are some little people that don't mind being called dwarves. We don't use that in our house really,
Mm-hmm.
but there have been some adults that I've met that have been okay with that term. Um, but it can be used in hurtful ways a lot of times. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever seen like midget wrestling, or there's
No.
been things like midget tossing and kind of sports
Mm.
related entertainment, that the LPA has really worked hard to kind of get that word just out of everyday use.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes
Yeah.
sense that it's the connotation of it that's just
Yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Especially the,
sense.
yeah, the way that you use it too just means a lot.
So so like I said, the example I used was another mom who had their child was called that. Has that ever happened to Nora?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not
What
yet,
is like
no.
your plan? Like, do you have like this plan of what you're going to respond with?
I I do have things that I would like to say, but I feel like in the moment, if that was to happen, I don't know that it would come out quite the way I have it planned. um, it makes me really angry to think about that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really worry about, her going to school when she becomes school age, and kids using that word, or, um, you know,
Yeah.
teasing her about her size and things like that. So I do have this grand plan in my head, but I'm not sure it would really play out the way
Yeah.
I have it planned.
I, I'm really curious what your grand plan is, because I think that's this is a unique struggle for these kids that have, like, I mean, Kimball and Nora are similar in that way, where they have these physical differences and, disabilities, but are cognitively aware. And so that they will, so unlike a child, I don't know, maybe with like Down syndrome or some kind of, cognitive delays where they might not pick up on bullying or like mean things that people would say, but it's like they'll know. They'll pick up, they'll know that people are being mean. Oh, it kills me. Like you, like, it makes me angry, like, to even
Yeah.
picture that day. But what is your, what do you call it? Your,
My grand plan.
yeah, what's your grand plan?
um, I think I would I think I would just sit her down and I'd focus on her first,
Mm,
and just remind her that those words are not what describe her, and try and build her up. Like, I think we're
mm-hmm.
doing that now anyways.
Right.
I'm just really focusing on, wow, how strong you are, and how smart you are, and not really focusing on her size. Not that I don't want her to accept her size, because that's going to be part of her forever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want her to think that that's all she is. And I don't want her to eventually, when those things do come up and kids are saying mean things, I don't want her to only attach those words to herself. Um, so as far as that part of my grand
Yeah.
plan, I would focus on her. As
I love
far
that.
as the targeter or the aggressor or whoever is using that word or other words
Mm-hmm.
to tease or bully, I definitely see myself walking into school and having a big meeting and addressing it head on.
Mm-hmm.
I do plan on addressing it ahead of time before something happens, and just letting
Oh, okay.
her school know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, um,
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea.
before it happens. But I my plan would be to have a pretty good sized meeting and talk about it and address it with the child or person that was using that word or
Mm-hmm.
teasing or bullying, um, and just
Yeah.
not that's not something that I would let go.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
a definite educational opportunity.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And that, oh, yeah, that's a painful type of educational opportunity, but
Yeah.
really important. And these people will go on and live their lives, and that could be really impactful for them to be like, I can't be mean to people or treat them this way.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, so let's just end with how you feel about your job to educate others on Nora's behalf and to teach her how to do the same.
I think right now well, my husband and I and my son are Nora's biggest advocates.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be her voice for now until she can kind of formulate a way to have her own voice when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to educating others. Um, I will always talk to her about her dwarfism. I will always be honest with her about it, um, so that she can then go and help herself by educating others, because I'm not always going to be there to be the one to step in and
Yeah.
tell them she's not a baby and she can do this and she's strong and she's smart and all those amazing things that she is. I want her
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do that for herself eventually. Especially
Mm-hmm.
entering school would be a good opportunity for her to be able to tell kids she's not a baby, um, and she can do
Mm-hmm.
whatever they can do, and she's not as different as she seems. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so I think it's still my job right now, but it's not always going to be. I mean, I will
Mm-hmm.
always advocate for her and I will always educate others on her behalf, but I want her to
Right.
be able to learn from us to do it on her own,
Mm-hmm.
so that she can feel confident about advocating for herself down the road.
Mm, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for sharing your wisdom about educating others about your children's differences.
Thank you.
You can like my Facebook page, The Rare Life Podcast, for sneak peeks about episodes coming up. Next week's professional episode is the perfect follow-up to today's episode as Dr. Lilach Saperstein shares all about advocating for your child using the FIG method. Don't miss it. See you then.